Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked his plasma rifle's energy cells. The readings showed only 30% power remaining. Not good. He was 3 days into what should have been a simple scouting mission on the planet Xerion Prime. But nothing about this place had been simple. The planet looked peaceful from orbit. Rolling green hills, crystal blue lakes, and forests that stretched beyond the horizon. The initial scan showed no intelligent life, no dangerous predators, and plenty of resources that could help humanity's expanding colonies. It seemed like the perfect world to claim and settle. That was before Marcus discovered the planet's inhabitants were very much alive and very much unhappy about visitors. The Xerians looked like a cross between lizards and birds, standing 8 feet tall with scales that shifted colors like chameleons. They had wings that could fold against their backs, sharp claws, and intelligence that rivaled humans. Most importantly, they breathed fire hot enough to melt steel. Marcus had been calling them dragons since his first encounter 2 days ago. The name seemed to fit better than the scientific designation his commanders would eventually assign them. Right now, one of those dragons was in serious trouble, and Marcus couldn't bring himself to walk away. The creature hung upside down from a massive metal net, suspended between 2 ancient stone pillars that jutted from the forest floor like broken teeth. The net was clearly alien technology, but not Xerion design. It hummed with energy that made Marcus's scanner beep frantically whenever he pointed it in that direction. The dragon's scales had turned a dull gray color that Marcus had learned meant pain or sickness. Its wings were twisted in the mesh, and dark blood dripped from several cuts where the metal wires had sliced through its hide. Worse, the creature was young. Marcus could tell by its size and the brighter patterns still visible along its neck and tail. He'd been watching for over an hour, hoping to see adult dragons come to rescue their trapped member. But the forest remained eerily quiet except for the wounded creature's labored breathing. Marcus knew he should report back to his ship and let the science team know about this new alien technology. The smart military move would be to document everything, maintain his cover, and avoid contact with the locals. His mission parameters were crystal clear about avoiding unnecessary engagement. But the dragon was dying. Marcus could see it growing weaker with each passing minute. "Damn it all," he muttered, shouldering his rifle and stepping out from behind the massive tree that had been his hiding spot. The young dragon's head snapped up at his approach. Its large golden eyes widened with surprise, then narrowed with suspicion. A small puff of flame escaped its nostrils, but the fire was weak and barely visible. Marcus raised both hands, showing he carried no weapons. "Easy there, big guy. I'm not here to hurt you." The dragon watched him warily, but didn't try to flame him again. Maybe it understood that Marcus could have attacked already if he'd wanted to, or maybe it was too tired to care anymore. Marcus circled the trap carefully, studying the net's construction. The metal was unlike anything in human databases. It seemed to be woven from a single continuous strand that pulsed with its own internal light. Where the metal touched the stone pillars, Marcus could see scorch marks and melted rock. This wasn't just a net. It was some kind of energy weapon designed specifically to capture large flying creatures. "Someone really wanted to catch your kind," Marcus said softly, more to calm himself than to communicate with the dragon. "Question is who?" He pulled out his plasma cutter, a small tool designed for emergency repairs on spacecraft. It wasn't powerful enough to cut through the energy net directly. But Marcus had another idea. The net was anchored to the stone pillars by 4 attachment points. Each anchor looked like a crystalline disk that had been fused into the rock. If Marcus could disrupt even one of those connections, the whole system might collapse. He approached the nearest pillar and knelt beside the crystal anchor. Up close, he could see it was covered in symbols that definitely weren't Xerion writing. The marks looked almost like circuit patterns, flowing and interconnected in ways that hurt to look at for too long. Marcus activated his plasma cutter and touched it to the crystal surface. Immediately, the entire net began to pulse faster. The dragon let out a sound that might have been alarm or encouragement. Marcus couldn't tell which, but he kept cutting. The crystal was harder than diamond, but the plasma cutter was designed to slice through spaceship hulls. Slowly, painfully slowly, a thin line began to appear in the alien material. Sparks flew as the crystal's internal energy began to leak out. The humming sound grew louder, almost angry. Marcus ignored the noise and focused on his work. The dragon's life depended on him getting this right. Behind him, the trapped creature made another sound. This time, Marcus was sure it was encouragement. He smiled grimly and cut deeper into the crystal. The anchor finally cracked with a sound like breaking glass amplified through a thunderstorm. The entire net jerked downward on one side, and the dragon cried out as the movement pulled at its injured wings. "Hang on," Marcus called out. "3 more to go." But as he moved to the second anchor, Marcus heard something that made his blood run cold. Voices in the distance, speaking in harsh syllables that weren't from any human language he knew, and they were getting closer. Whoever had set this trap was coming back to check on their catch. Marcus looked at his plasma cutter's energy reading. 20% power left, maybe enough to cut one more anchor if he was lucky. The young dragon seemed to understand the danger too. It had gone completely still, its scales shifting to match the darker colors of the net around it. Natural camouflage that would have been perfect if not for the blood still dripping to the forest floor. Marcus made his decision. He sprinted to the second anchor and started cutting, pushing his tool to maximum power. Speed was more important than conservation now. The voices were getting louder. He could make out at least 3 different speakers, and they didn't sound happy. Marcus finished cutting the second anchor just as the first alien appeared at the edge of the clearing. It wasn't a Xerian dragon. It was something else entirely, and it was carrying weapons that looked far more advanced than anything in Marcus's arsenal. The real fight was about to begin. The alien hunter stood nearly 10 feet tall, covered in sleek black armor that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Its helmet had multiple glowing eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, and its weapon looked like it could punch holes through a battleship. Marcus had never seen anything like it in all his years fighting across the galaxy. 2 more hunters emerged from the forest, moving with the coordinated precision of a military unit. They spread out automatically, cutting off Marcus's escape routes while keeping their weapons trained on him. Professional soldiers just like him, but from a species that humanity had never encountered. The first hunter spoke in its harsh language, and Marcus's translation device caught enough words to understand the basics. They were surprised to find a human here. They were asking each other what to do with him. And they were very unhappy about their damaged trap. Marcus kept his hands visible and his movements slow. His plasma rifle was slung across his back, but reaching for it would be suicide against 3 armed opponents. Instead, he gestured toward the trapped dragon and spoke in his calmest voice. "Your prisoner is injured. If you don't get medical attention soon, it's going to die before you can do whatever you planned." The lead hunter tilted its head, and Marcus's translator crackled with its response. "The specimen's health is not your concern, human. You will explain your presence here and your interference with our equipment." "I'm just a lost explorer," Marcus lied smoothly. "My ship crashed 3 days ago. I was looking for shelter when I found your trap and saw the creature was hurt. I thought I was helping." It was a weak story, but sometimes the simple lies worked best. Marcus watched the hunter's body language, looking for any sign of what they might do next. Behind him, he could hear the young dragon's labored breathing growing even more strained. The second hunter spoke up, pointing its weapon directly at Marcus's chest. The translation came through clearly. "Human lies. This one carries military equipment and moves like a trained warrior. We should eliminate the threat and continue our work." Marcus felt his heart rate spike, but he kept his expression neutral. These aliens knew enough about humans to recognize a soldier when they saw one. That suggested this wasn't their first encounter with his species, which raised uncomfortable questions about how much they knew about human expansion into this sector. The lead hunter raised one armored hand, and the second hunter lowered its weapon slightly. A commander making tactical decisions. Marcus filed that information away for later, assuming he lived long enough to use it. "Your species has a reputation for violence and unpredictability," the commander said, "but also for forming emotional attachments to other life forms. Is this what we observe here?" Marcus glanced back at the trapped dragon. Its golden eyes were still watching him, and he could swear he saw intelligence there. Not just animal instinct, but actual thought and understanding. The creature knew he was trying to help, and it knew they were all in danger. "Maybe," Marcus admitted. "Where I come from, we don't like seeing things suffer needlessly." The third hunter spoke for the first time, its voice carrying what sounded like amusement. "Curious. The human shows concern for a species that would incinerate him without hesitation. These dragons are apex predators, not domestic animals requiring rescue." "Apex predators can still feel pain," Marcus replied. "And this one's just a kid." The hunters exchanged glances, their helmet lights blinking in patterns that might have been some form of communication. Marcus used their distraction to take a closer look at their weapons and armor. The technology was definitely more advanced than anything humanity possessed, but it wasn't impossibly so. If he could get his hands on one of those rifles, he might have a fighting chance. The commander made a decision. You will complete the repairs to our containment system. Your plasma cutter will suffice to restore the damaged anchor points. And if I refuse, then you will join the specimen in captivity. Our employers have expressed interest in studying human physiology, alongside that of the local dragons. Your choice is whether you assist us voluntarily or become an unwilling research subject. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Whoever these hunters worked for wasn't just capturing dragons for sport or simple research. They were building a collection of sentient species, and humans were apparently on their shopping list. Behind him, the young dragon made a soft sound that his translator couldn't interpret. But Marcus didn't need a translation to understand pain and fear. The creature was running out of time, and so was he. I'll help, Marcus said finally, but I want to treat its injuries first. Dead specimens aren't much use to anyone. The commander considered this for a long moment. You may stabilize the creature, but you will not attempt to free it. Any effort to damage our equipment further will result in your immediate termination. Marcus nodded and slowly reached into his pack for his emergency medical kit. The hunters tracked his every movement with their weapons, but they didn't interfere as he approached the trapped dragon. Up close, the creature was even more magnificent than he'd realized. Its scales weren't just gray from pain. They were actually shifting through a complex spectrum of colors that might have been a form of communication. Its wings, twisted in the energy net, showed delicate bone structure similar to a bat's, but with membranes that seemed to contain their own luminescent patterns. Easy now, Marcus whispered as he examined the deepest cuts. This is going to sting, but it'll help. The dragon flinched as Marcus cleaned the wounds with antiseptic, but it didn't try to bite or flame him. If anything, it seemed to understand that he was trying to help. When he applied synthetic skin patches to the worst injuries, the creature actually made a sound that seemed grateful. As Marcus worked, he spoke quietly to the dragon, knowing the hunters couldn't understand most human languages. I'm going to get you out of this. I don't know how yet, but I promise you won't end up in some alien laboratory. The dragon's golden eyes fixed on his face, and Marcus could have sworn it nodded slightly. Hurry, human, the commander called out. Our transport arrives in 1 standard hour. The repairs must be completed before then. Marcus finished bandaging the dragon's injuries and turned back to face the hunters. His plasma cutter had maybe 15% power left. Enough to fix their trap, but not enough to fight his way out afterward. He was going to have to get creative. I'll need to recalibrate the energy matrix, Marcus said, improvising technical language. The damage created feedback loops that could overload your whole system if I just weld the crystals back together. It was complete nonsense, but it sounded convincing. The hunters exchanged those blinking light patterns again, probably trying to decide if he was telling the truth. Finally, the commander gestured with its weapon. Proceed. But remember, human, we are watching. Marcus knelt beside the damaged crystal anchor and activated his plasma cutter one more time. But instead of repairing the alien technology, he was about to turn their own trap against them. He just hoped the young dragon would understand what he was planning. Marcus pretended to work on the damaged crystal anchor, while his mind raced through possibilities. The hunters stood in a triangle formation around him, professionally spaced to avoid friendly fire, while maintaining overlapping fields of coverage. They were good, but they were also confident. That confidence might be their weakness. As he adjusted his plasma cutter's settings, Marcus studied the energy flow patterns in the alien net. The system was more sophisticated than he'd first realized. The 4 crystal anchors weren't just attachment points. They were nodes in a complex energy matrix that created the containment field. If he could overload one node correctly, it might create a cascade failure that would bring down the entire network. The question was whether he could do it fast enough to avoid getting shot. The matrix is more unstable than I thought, Marcus called out to the hunters. I'm seeing power fluctuations that suggest a core resonance problem. If this thing overloads, it could take out half the forest. The lead hunter stepped closer, its multiple eyes glowing brighter with what might have been concern. Explain this resonance problem, human. Marcus stood up slowly, keeping his hands visible. Your containment system works by creating overlapping energy fields, right? Each anchor point generates a specific frequency that harmonizes with the others. But when one anchor gets damaged like this, it can start broadcasting interference patterns. He was making most of it up, but the basic principles were sound. Most energy-based weapons and containment systems did rely on harmonic frequencies to maintain stability. If the interference gets strong enough, Marcus continued, the whole system could go into what we call a resonance cascade. Think of it like a feedback loop that keeps getting stronger until something breaks, usually something big and explosive. The second hunter spoke in its harsh language, and Marcus's translator picked up words that roughly meant danger and abort mission. Good. They were getting nervous. The commander held up one hand to silence its subordinate. You will continue repairs immediately. Our employers do not accept delays or excuses. Marcus nodded and knelt back down beside the crystal anchor. But this time, instead of trying to fix it, he began making very specific cuts designed to create exactly the kind of resonance cascade he'd just described. The trick was making it look like an accident. He touched his plasma cutter to the crystal surface and began tracing what appeared to be a repair pattern. In reality, he was cutting a series of microscopic grooves that would disrupt the energy flow in very specific ways. If his understanding of harmonic systems was correct, these disruptions would propagate through the entire network within seconds. Behind him, the young dragon had gone completely still. Marcus hoped it was smart enough to understand that something was about to happen. The first sign of success came as a barely audible change in the net's humming. The frequency shifted slightly, just enough to make Marcus's teeth ache. The hunters noticed it too. He could see their weapons tracking back and forth as they searched for the source of the disturbance. What is that sound? The commander demanded. Just the system recalibrating, Marcus replied, trying to sound confident. It'll settle down in a minute. But the humming was getting louder and the energy patterns in the net were beginning to flicker visibly. The dragon's scales started shifting colors rapidly, cycling through what Marcus was beginning to recognize as excitement or anticipation. The third hunter suddenly raised its weapon, pointing it directly at Marcus's head. Commander, the human is sabotaging our equipment. Marcus looked up from his work, putting on his best confused expression. I'm doing exactly what you told me to do. If you don't like my repair methods, maybe you should have brought your own engineer. The commander stepped forward, its multiple eyes focusing on the flickering energy net. Explain the visual distortions in the containment field. Those are normal flux patterns during recalibration. Marcus lied smoothly. The system has to cycle through different frequency ranges to find the optimal harmonic resonance. It looks dramatic, but it's perfectly safe. Even as he spoke, the energy fluctuations were getting stronger. The net was now pulsing with visible waves of light that made the air around it shimmer like heat distortion. The young dragon was watching intently, its body tensed as if ready to move the instant it got the chance. The second hunter spoke urgently in its own language, and Marcus's translator caught fragments about energy cascade and dangerous levels. These aliens might be from a different species, but they understood unstable technology when they saw it. The commander made a decision. Cease repairs immediately. We will extract the specimen using alternative methods. I wouldn't do that, Marcus said quickly. Interrupting the recalibration cycle could cause exactly the kind of cascade failure I warned you about. Give me 5 more minutes to complete the stabilization sequence. It was a calculated bluff. Marcus needed more time for his sabotage to reach critical levels, but he couldn't appear too eager to continue working. The commander had to believe that stopping now would be more dangerous than letting him finish. For a long moment, the lead hunter stared at Marcus with its alien eyes. Then it stepped back and gestured to its subordinates. Maintain targeting solutions. If the energy levels exceed safe parameters, eliminate the human and abort the mission. Marcus nodded and returned to his work, but his heart was pounding. The cascade was building faster than he'd expected. The crystal anchor under his plasma cutter was starting to crack, and hairline fractures were spreading through the stone pillar that supported it. The young dragon suddenly made a sound that was definitely not pain or fear. It was a call, loud and clear and somehow musical despite coming from a creature that could breathe fire. Marcus didn't need a translator to understand what it meant. The dragon was calling for help. The hunters immediately raised their weapons, scanning the surrounding forest for threats. They'd heard that call before, and they knew what it meant as well as Marcus did. How long since you captured it? Marcus asked, trying to keep his voice casual while his plasma cutter continued weakening the crystal anchor. 3 local days, the commander replied, its attention focused on the tree line.
Why do you ask?
Marcus smiled grimly. Because dragons are social creatures, and 3 days is plenty of time for a search party to track down a missing family member. The first answering call came from the north, echoing through the forest with a power that made the ground vibrate. Then another from the east. Then a third from the south, closer than the others. The hunters were now completely focused on the approaching threat, their weapons trained outward instead of on Marcus. Perfect. He made his final cut through the crystal anchor just as the first adult dragon appeared above the forest canopy. It was enormous, easily twice the size of the young one trapped in the net. Its scales were deep crimson touched with gold, and when it opened its mouth to roar, Marcus could see flames building in its throat that would make his plasma rifle look like a toy. The energy net finally reached cascade failure. All 4 anchors exploded simultaneously in showers of crystal fragments and electrical discharge. The net collapsed, dropping the young dragon toward the forest floor. Marcus threw himself sideways as the hunters opened fire on the approaching dragons. Energy beams seared through the air where he'd been standing, but his attention was focused on the falling youngster. The young dragon's wings snapped open just before it hit the ground. Injured as it was, it still managed to glide to a relatively soft landing behind one of the stone pillars. Safe for the moment, but not for long, because now Marcus was trapped in the middle of a firefight between alien hunters and very angry dragons, with nowhere to run and only 15% power left in his plasma rifle. The real battle was just beginning. The forest erupted into chaos as 3 massive adult dragons descended on the clearing like living missiles. The lead hunter managed to get off one shot before a stream of fire hot enough to melt armor turned it into a flaming statue. Its weapon clattered to the ground, still sparking with residual energy. Marcus dove behind the nearest stone pillar as the other 2 hunters scattered, their disciplined formation breaking apart under the fury of the dragon attack. Energy beams lanced through the air, missing their targets as the dragons moved with impossible grace for creatures their size. The largest dragon, the crimson one Marcus had seen first, landed with an impact that shook the ground. It had to be the young dragon's parent. The protective fury in its golden eyes was unmistakable. When it roared, the sound was like thunder mixed with the scream of tearing metal. Marcus pressed himself against the stone pillar and tried to think tactically. The dragons had the advantage of numbers, size, and raw firepower, but the hunters' weapons were devastatingly effective. One direct hit from those energy rifles could probably kill even an adult dragon. Right now, the aliens were outgunned, but they were also professional soldiers. They'd adapt quickly. The young dragon was still behind the pillar across from Marcus, its wings folded protectively around its body. It was alive and conscious, but those injuries would slow it down if the fight came its way. Marcus had to keep the hunters focused on other targets. He unslung his plasma rifle and checked the power reading. 15%. Maybe 4 or 5 shots if he was careful with the settings. Not much, but enough to make a difference if he used them right. The second hunter had taken cover behind a fallen tree and was trying to flank the crimson dragon. Marcus could see the alien's position clearly, but the dragon couldn't. It was focused on the third hunter who was keeping it distracted from the front. Simple tactics. Misdirection and crossfire. Humans had been using the same techniques for thousands of years, and apparently other species had figured them out too. Marcus aimed carefully and squeezed his rifle's trigger. The plasma bolt caught the flanking hunter's center mass, punching through its armor and dropping it immediately. The alien's weapon went flying, landing in the undergrowth several meters away. The crimson dragon's head snapped around at the sound of Marcus's shot. For a terrifying moment, he thought it might attack him instead of the remaining hunter. Those golden eyes were filled with rage and protective instinct, and Marcus was just another unknown threat in the immediate area. But the young dragon made a sound from its hiding place, a series of musical notes that somehow conveyed meaning across species barriers. The parent dragon's eyes widened with what might have been surprise, then narrowed with something that looked like understanding. It turned back to face the last hunter, but it didn't attack immediately. Instead, it began stalking the alien with careful, measured steps, giving Marcus time to act. Marcus sprinted across the clearing toward the fallen hunter's weapon. The remaining alien saw him coming and swung its rifle around, But the Crimson Dragon chose that moment to breathe fire. The hunter had to dive for cover, giving Marcus the seconds he needed to reach the advanced weapon. The alien rifle was heavier than his plasma gun and covered in symbols that meant nothing to him, but the basic operation seemed straightforward. Point and shoot, just like every other ranged weapon ever made, Marcus hoped. He raised the captured rifle and aimed at the last hunter's position. The alien was trying to retreat toward the forest edge, probably hoping to reach some kind of extraction point. Marcus couldn't let that happen. If even one hunter escaped, they'd report back to their employers about both the dragons and the human presence on this world. The alien weapon fired differently than Marcus expected. Instead of a single plasma bolt, it discharged a stream of energy that cut through trees and stone like they were made of paper. The hunter disappeared in a flash of superheated air and vaporized armor. Marcus lowered the weapon, his hands shaking slightly from adrenaline. 3 alien hunters eliminated, their advanced technology captured, and no immediate threats remaining. But he was far from safe. The 3 adult dragons were now focused entirely on him. The Crimson Parent moved closer, its massive head tilting as it studied the human who had helped rescue its offspring. The other 2 dragons flanked Marcus at a respectful distance, ready to act if he proved hostile. Marcus slowly set the alien weapon on the ground and raised his hands. "I'm not a threat," he said, though he doubted they understood his words. "I helped your youngster because it was the right thing to do." The young dragon emerged from behind its pillar, limping slightly but moving under its own power. It approached Marcus cautiously, then did something unexpected. It pressed its snout gently against Marcus's shoulder, almost like a cat rubbing against a friendly human. The adult dragons exchanged glances, their scales shifting through colors that Marcus was beginning to recognize as a form of communication. Whatever the young one had told them about him, it seemed to be positive. The Crimson Dragon stepped forward and made a sound that was completely different from its earlier roars. This was musical, almost like singing with harmonics that resonated in Marcus's chest. When it finished, the other 2 dragons repeated the same sequence of notes. Marcus didn't need a translator to understand ritual when he heard it. They were thanking him. "You're welcome," he said softly. "Your kid's brave. It never gave up fighting even when things looked hopeless." The young dragon made another series of musical sounds, and its parent responded with what sounded like gentle scolding. Marcus smiled despite the strangeness of the situation. Some things were universal, including parents worrying about their children taking unnecessary risks. But his smile faded as he considered the implications of what had just happened. The alien hunters hadn't been operating alone. They'd mentioned employers, transport arriving, and extracting specimens for study. Somewhere out there was a larger organization that collected sentient species for unknown purposes, and they now knew about both dragons and humans. Marcus looked at the young dragon, noting how its scales had returned to their natural bright patterns now that it was safe. The intelligence in its golden eyes was unmistakable. These weren't just animals. They were people. People with families, culture, and the right to exist free from alien predators. The Crimson Dragon seemed to sense Marcus's troubled thoughts. It approached slowly and lowered its massive head until they were at eye level. When it spoke this time, the sounds were different again. Not the ritual thanks or gentle scolding, but something more complex. A conversation. Marcus wished desperately for a universal translator, but he tried to respond anyway. "I don't understand your language, but I think we have a common problem. Those hunters weren't here by accident. They'll be back, probably with more ships and better weapons." The dragon tilted its head, then made a gesture with one clawed hand that seemed to indicate Marcus should follow. It walked to where the fallen hunter's equipment lay scattered across the clearing, and nudged the alien weapons with its snout. The message was clear. The dragons understood technology, and they knew these weapons represented a serious threat to their people. They also seemed to understand that Marcus might be an ally in whatever was coming next. As the sun began to set through the forest canopy, casting long shadows across the battlefield, Marcus realized his simple scouting mission had just become something much more complicated. He was now part of an interspecies alliance. Whether he'd planned it or not, the real question was what they were going to do about the larger threat still out there among the stars. 3 days after the battle with the alien hunters, Marcus found himself in a place he never could have imagined. Deep within the heart of a mountain, in chambers carved from living rock and lit by crystals that pulsed with their own inner fire, He sat in what could only be described as a dragon throne room. The young dragon he'd saved, whose name sounded something like Pyraxis when translated through the basic communication system they'd developed, had led him here through a maze of tunnels and caverns. The dragon city was unlike anything in human imagination. Graceful spires rose from the cavern floor, connected by bridges wide enough for dragons to fly beneath. Waterfalls cascaded down the walls, powering machinery that hummed with sophisticated engineering. Most importantly, it was home to thousands of dragons. Marcus had thought he was saving one lost youngster, but Pyraxis turned out to be something much more significant than a random civilian. The crimson dragon from the battle approached Marcus now, moving with ceremonial dignity that spoke of high rank. Through gestures, crude drawings, and the few words they'd managed to translate, Marcus had learned this was Pyraxis's parent and one of the dragon leaders. The name was complex, but Marcus had settled on Flameheart as close enough for practical purposes. Flameheart began speaking in the musical dragon language, while a smaller dragon with silver scales translated using a primitive computer interface they'd cobbled together from salvaged alien technology and Marcus's own equipment. The honored Flameheart says that you have performed a deed of great honor, the translated voice came through Marcus's communicator with electronic distortion. The child you saved is not merely offspring, but heir to the Flame Throne. You have preserved the continuation of our royal bloodline. Marcus blinked in surprise. Royal bloodline? You mean Pyraxis is a prince? The young dragon, who had been listening intently, made a sound that Marcus had learned was amusement. The silver dragon translated again. The heir corrects that dragon nobility does not translate directly to human concepts. Pyraxis will inherit responsibilities, not privileges. The role is earned through wisdom and service to the clan. And now, Flameheart continued through the translator, we face a threat that endangers all our people. The metal hunters you helped defeat are scouts for a greater evil. They seek to capture and study all intelligent life in this sector of space. Marcus nodded grimly. He'd suspected as much from what he'd overheard during the battle. What do you know about them? Their technology was more advanced than anything my people have encountered. The silver dragon worked at the translation interface for several moments before responding. The metal hunters call themselves the Collective. They appear in many star systems, taking specimens from every sentient species they encounter. Some they study and release. Others are never seen again. They have been active in this region for many cycles of the greater moon. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. If these collective aliens had been operating in human space without being detected, it meant they were far more sophisticated than anyone had realized. And if they were taking human specimens as well as dragon, have they captured humans before? Marcus asked. More discussion in the musical dragon language, with several other dragons joining the conversation. Finally, the translation came through.
Yes. 3 seasons ago, they took a group of humans from a small colony world in the next star system.
We attempted to intervene, but we were too few and their ships too powerful. Marcus closed his eyes, processing the implications. A human colony wiped out by alien slavers, and Earth Command had never even known about it. How many other colonies had suffered the same fate? How many species across the galaxy were fighting the same battle in isolation? Pyraxis moved closer to Marcus and made a series of gentle sounds. The translation came through softer than usual. The heir asks if your people would stand with us against the collective threat. The metal hunters will return in greater numbers now that they know we resist their efforts. Marcus looked around the throne chamber, taking in the faces of dozens of dragons who had gathered to hear this conversation. These were people with families, culture, art, and technology. They'd built a civilization that had endured for generations, and now it was threatened by alien predators who saw them as nothing more than specimens to be collected. I can't speak for all humanity, Marcus said finally, but I can speak for myself. And I know there are others who would stand with you if they knew what was happening out here. Flameheart spoke again, and this time the translation carried a note of formal ceremony. Then let this be the beginning of alliance between flame and steel, between dragon and human. We offer you the calling of the honored friend, a bond that extends beyond species and beyond death. Before Marcus could ask what that meant, every dragon in the chamber began to sing. It started as individual voices, but quickly harmonized into something that seemed to resonate in his bones. The crystal lighting in the chamber pulsed in time with the music, and Marcus felt something shift in his perception of the world around him. When the song ended, He found he could understand fragments of the dragon language without translation, not fluently, but enough to catch the basic meaning of simple phrases. Somehow the ceremony had created a linguistic bridge between his mind and theirs. "The bond is made," the silver dragon said, though Marcus could now hear the actual words beneath the electronic translation. "You are clan friend to the people of the Flame Throne. Our strength is yours, and yours is ours." Marcus stood and bowed formally, drawing on military ceremony training that seemed appropriate for the moment. "I'm honored to accept, and I promise you this. The collective will not take your people without a fight." But even as he spoke the words, Marcus knew they were facing an enormous challenge. The dragon technology was impressive but focused mainly on engineering and metallurgy. Their weapons were primitive compared to what the alien hunters had carried. And humanity's military forces were scattered across dozens of star systems, most of them unaware that this threat even existed. Paraxis approached Marcus again and gestured toward one of the chamber's side passages. The young dragon led him to a smaller room filled with what looked like communication equipment, though designed for claws rather than human hands. "Before the bond ceremony," Paraxis said, and Marcus was startled to realize he could understand the words directly now. "We detected transmissions from your people's ships, messages of urgency and concern." Marcus's blood ran cold. "Messages about what?" The young dragon manipulated controls that looked like crystalline keyboards, and a holographic display materialized in the air above them. It showed star charts with ship movements marked in different colors. Human vessels were marked in blue, and Marcus could see they were converging on this star system from multiple directions. "Your people are coming to find you," Paraxis explained. "The signals we intercepted suggest they believe you are in danger." Marcus studied the display with growing alarm. Those were military ships, and they were approaching at maximum speed. If they arrived in system while tensions were high and found evidence of the battle with the alien hunters, they might assume the dragons were responsible for his disappearance. First contact between humans and dragons was about to happen, and it could easily turn into a disaster if not handled correctly. "How long before they arrive?" Marcus asked. "Based on their current speed, the first ships will reach this world within 2 solar days," Paraxis replied. "And there is more you should know. The collective scouts transmitted a signal before you destroyed them. Their reinforcements are also approaching the system." Marcus stared at the holographic display as the full scope of the situation became clear. Within days, 3 different spacefaring civilizations were going to converge on this world. Humans looking for their lost soldier, dragons defending their homeland, and alien slavers coming to complete their mission. The outcome would determine the future of human expansion, dragon civilization, and possibly the freedom of every sentient species in this part of the galaxy. Marcus looked at Paraxis, seeing intelligence and determination in those golden eyes. "Looks like we're going to need a very good plan." The young dragon's scales shifted to patterns that Marcus now recognized as grim amusement. "Yes, honored friend. A very good plan indeed." Outside the mountain, the first human ships had already entered the outer edge of the star system. The message that changed everything arrived 18 hours before the human fleet reached orbital position around Xerion Prime. Marcus stood in the Dragon Communication Center, watching translation matrices scroll across holographic displays as Paraxis and the Silver Dragon worked frantically to decode an incoming transmission. "It's not from your people," Paraxis said, golden eyes reflecting the light from the displays. "The signal originated from the outer system boundary, but the encoding is collective technology." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "The alien slavers?" "More than that," the Silver Dragon replied, manipulating crystalline controls that shifted the display to show a massive ship formation approaching from deep space. "This is not a raiding party. This is an invasion fleet." The hologram expanded to show the true scope of what they were facing. Dozens of ships, each the size of a human dreadnought, moving in perfect formation toward Xerion Prime. Marcus had seen military displays before, but nothing quite like this. The collective fleet moved with mechanical precision that spoke of artificial intelligence coordination. "How long before they arrive?" Marcus asked. 6 hours after your people achieve orbit, Paraxis calculated. Long enough for first contact between humans and dragons to go badly wrong, but not long enough to forge a proper alliance. Marcus studied the tactical situation with growing dread. The human fleet consisted of 3 heavy cruisers and a dozen support vessels. Powerful by human standards, but designed for exploration and colony defense, not warfare against advanced alien technology. The Dragons had defensive advantages and superior knowledge of local space, but their weapons were designed for planetary combat, not ship-to-ship battle. Either force alone would be crushed by the incoming collective fleet. Together they might have a chance, but only if they could coordinate their efforts instead of fighting each other. "The message we intercepted," Marcus said. "What did it say?" The silver dragon scales shifted to darker patterns that Marcus had learned indicated distress. "The collective is demanding immediate surrender of all specimens in this star system. Humans, dragons, and any other sentient life forms are to be gathered at designated collection points for transport to their research facilities. And if we refuse, total sterilization of the planet and destruction of all orbital assets." Marcus closed his eyes and tried to think tactically. The collective wasn't just after specimens anymore. They decided that both humans and dragons represented too much trouble to capture selectively. Now they wanted to eliminate the threat and collect genetic samples from the debris. "There has to be something we can do," Marcus said. "Some weakness in their approach or their technology." Pyraxis moved to another control station and brought up the tactical analysis they'd been working on since intercepting the first collective transmissions. "Their ships are powerful but inflexible. They rely on overwhelming force and superior technology, rather than creative tactics. They expect resistance to be scattered and uncoordinated, because that's what they've encountered so far," Marcus realized. "Every species they've attacked has been fighting alone." The silver dragon's eyes widened with understanding. "But if 2 species coordinate their defense using combined tactics that neither could achieve alone, we might surprise them," Marcus finished. "The question is how to convince my people to work with yours instead of treating this as 2 separate first contact situations." Before anyone could answer, alarms began sounding throughout the communication center. Dragon voices called out in their musical language, and Marcus could catch enough words to understand the basic message. The human fleet had arrived. Pyraxis gestured toward the main display, which now showed 3 massive human vessels moving into high orbit around Xerion Prime. Their weapons were powered down, and their approach was cautious, but they were clearly conducting intensive sensor sweeps of the planet's surface. "They're looking for me," Marcus said. "Standard search and rescue protocols. They'll have detected the energy signatures from the battle with the collective scouts, and they will assume we are responsible for your disappearance," the silver dragon added grimly. Marcus made a decision that would either save 2 civilizations or doom them both. "I need to contact my people directly, face to face, before they have time to misinterpret what they're seeing down here. The collective fleet will detect any transmission between surface and orbit," Pyraxis warned. "They are monitoring all communication frequencies. Then we'll have to get creative." 3 hours later, Marcus found himself doing something that would have been impossible just a week ago. He was riding on the back of an adult dragon, flying at maximum speed toward the coordinates where a human shuttle was conducting surface reconnaissance. Flameheart had volunteered for the mission, despite the obvious risks. The Crimson Dragon was large enough to carry Marcus safely, fast enough to intercept the shuttle before it returned to orbit, and senior enough in Dragon hierarchy to speak with authority for their people. "Remember the plan," Marcus called out over the rush of wind. "We approach from their starboard side where they'll see us coming. No sudden movements, no flames, no displays of aggression. Let them get a good look at both of us before we try to communicate." Flameheart's response was lost in the wind, but Marcus felt the dragon's acknowledgement through the subtle shift in flight patterns. The bond ceremony had created more than just linguistic bridges. He was beginning to sense Flameheart's emotions and intentions as if they were his own. The human shuttle appeared ahead of them, a sleek military reconnaissance craft conducting grid pattern searches across the forest where Marcus had first encountered the collective hunters. Marcus could see the pilot and co-pilot through the cockpit windows, their faces hidden behind flight helmets but their body language suggesting intense concentration on their sensor readings. Flameheart adjusted course to intercept, moving with careful precision to avoid appearing threatening. As they drew closer, Marcus saw the exact moment when the shuttle crew noticed them. The craft wobbled slightly as the pilot did a double take, then immediately shifted to evasive maneuvers. Shuttle Bravo 7, this is Sergeant Marcus Chen, serial number 7751 Delta 9. Marcus broadcast on emergency frequencies. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage. I am unharmed and approaching with a local representative for immediate parley. The shuttle's evasive movement stopped abruptly. Marcus could imagine the confusion in the cockpit as his transmission was verified against ship records. Sergeant Chen, this is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Torres, came the reply. Confirm your identity with code phrase Whiskey Alpha 7. Affirmative. Whiskey Alpha 7. The eagle flies at midnight, but the serpent owns the dawn. Identity confirmed. Sergeant, what in the hell is that thing you're riding? Marcus looked down at Flameheart's massive form, scales gleaming in the afternoon sunlight, powerful wings beating with steady rhythm. Her name is Flameheart, Commander. She's the leader of the local population, and she's here to prevent a war that could destroy both our species. Both our species? Sergeant, you need to explain that statement immediately. I will, but not over open channels. We have 6 hours before this gets a lot more complicated. Can you land somewhere secure where we can talk face to face? There was a long pause before Torres responded. There's a clearing 2 kilometers north of your current position. We'll set down there, but Sergeant, if this is some kind of trick or if you're being coerced, it's not a trick, Commander. But you need to know that everything you've been told about this planet is wrong. The local population is not only sentient, they're our best hope for surviving what's coming. As the shuttle changed course toward the designated landing site, Marcus felt Flameheart's emotional state through their bond. The dragon was nervous but determined, understanding that the next few minutes would determine the fate of both their peoples. Below them, hidden in the depths of space, the collective invasion fleet continued its inexorable approach toward Xerion Prime. The clock was running out, and everything depended on whether a human soldier and a dragon leader could convince their peoples to trust each other in time to face the greater threat. Together, Marcus gripped Flameheart's scales more tightly as they began their descent toward what might be either the beginning of the greatest alliance in galactic history or the last meeting between 2 doomed civilizations. Either way, the next few hours would be remembered forever by whoever survived to tell the story.